And there I was, free, but with a plastic bag on my hand. I was picking up that which I had been dodging for 8 solid years.
Former President Bush spent part of his 4th of July holiday weekend in Woodward, Oklahoma, telling poop jokes about his dog Barney. President Obama spent part of his holiday weekend preparing for a 3-day summit in Russia. You want a few more differences? We have your differences. President Bush, upon meeting then President Vladimir Putin in 2001, said this.
I looked the man in the eye. I found it to be very straightforward and trustworthy. We had a very good dialogue. I was able to get a sense of his soul.
President Obama, speaking of now Prime Minister Putin, whom he will meet for the first time tomorrow, said, quote, "I think Putin has one foot in the old ways of doing business and one foot in the new." Snap. President Bush's Russian policy included canceling a civilian nuclear cooperation agreement that took 2 years to put together. President Obama's way of dealing with Russia: on day 1 of his 3-day visit, he signed a preliminary agreement with Russian President Medvedev to reduce nuclear stockpiles in both the U.S. and Russia by up to 1/3, a greater possible reduction than any previous agreement. And President Obama reached a deal to allow the U.S. to transport military personnel and equipment across Russia to support troops in Afghanistan. So it appears President Obama's approach is different. Whether or not the results are better is an open question. Joining us now, Joe Ciricione, president of the Plowshare Fund, a global security foundation. Thanks for being with us. He's also the author of Bomb Scare,
Allison.
The History and Future of Nuclear Weapons. So this is the first agreement of its kind in something like 7 years to reduce strategic warheads to between 1,500 and 1,675, to make even deeper cuts in the delivery systems. Is this the right move, sir?
Oh, absolutely. ABC News called this deal a breakthrough and an extraordinary agreement today. Henry Kissinger called Obama a chess master. Obama did something that very few presidents have been able to do. He turned around U.S.-Russian relations, with just 11 months ago were as bad as they were during the Cold War period after the Georgian conflict between Georgia and Russia. He's turned those around. He's reset U.S.-Russian relations just as he intended to, and he's got agreements on this very first day to slash U.S.-Russian arsenals by as much as 1/3, dramatic reductions, to get Russian cooperation to secure all loose nukes and materials in that country within the next 4 years, thereby reducing the chances of nuclear terrorism. He's got agreement with the Russians on preventing North Korea and Iran's programs, including the first ever U.S.-Russian joint threat assessment of the Iranian ballistic missile program, and the Russians know quite a bit about that program. And he's got cooperations with the Russians for a global summit next year on nuclear security. And he gave up for these agreements exactly nothing. Zip. Nada. No concessions on the part of the United States, just showing the Russian president, the Russian government, respect and an understanding of their points of view.
Let me dive in on a couple of the points you made there. The New York Times suggested a reduction like this would send a clear message to North Korea and to Iran. Do you think this does it?
I think it does, but it's only the first step. Neither president thinks this is the end of the reduction process. It's what they could achieve in the next few months, and they hit the sweet spot on the numbers, big enough to be significant reductions, but realistic enough to win the agreement of their respective parliaments. Both presidents see this as a first step in a multi-step process towards the eventual elimination of nuclear weapons. Once this agreement is concluded, they will immediately begin negotiations on a new treaty that would reduce the arsenals much more dramatically, down to perhaps 1,000 weapons each. That would be a reduction from the approximately 10,000 weapons we have and the 12,000 weapons Russia has. That's the kind of vision both these presidents share, and they made a significant down payment on realizing that vision today.
What do you think about the issue of missile defense? Will it be a sticking point?
It is a sticking point. It is difficult. President Obama's been stuck with this rushed plan that President Bush put in place, intentionally to try to lock his successor in to a deal to put interceptors in Poland and radars in the Czech Republic. The problem is that those interceptors don't exist yet, and the radar appears to have some significant flaws in it. It probably wouldn't be able to see an Iranian missile that were launched at it. But the Russians see this as a serious strategic threat. Both, they think that the U.S. could someday increase the number of interceptors, put hundreds in and not just 10 as is currently planned, or they might be able to put nuclear warheads on those missiles and use them offensively. And this is compounded by the deep suspicions they have of U.S. intentions with expanding NATO and building military bases on their border. Obama bridged that gap today. He didn't solve it, but he definitely put in place a structure to resolve these differences, including pausing on any plans to go ahead with the European defense system until he's able to review it, he said, something he's going to do this summer, and find out whether it even works or not. I'm confident that such a review will conclude that this system, in fact, does not work, and there are other more systems that we can do with the Russians that actually would provide a missile defense to the existing Iranian threat.
Tomorrow, Obama is meeting with Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, who obviously is still quite influential. Anything we should watch for there?
I believe Obama's got a balancing act that he's proved very adept at doing. He recognizes that the Russian system shares power between the Prime Minister Putin and the President Medvedev, and he's showing both respect to both of these leaders, not choosing sides, not tilting towards one or the other. I would expect that Putin would come out with a similar statement endorsing Obama's approach and again taking the U.S.-Russian relationship, which has soured so much in the past year or two, and resetting it in a new, more cooperative direction.
Joe Cirincione, president of Plowshares Fund, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure, Allison.